This is the September office hours for Oracle Database and Node.js. My name is Christopher Jones, Product Manager here at the Oracle Database world. And we also have Anthony Tuininga, who does a lot of this development lower levels, Dan McGhan, who is an evangelist in this space, and Blaine Carter, who's also an evangelist, who's slightly different areas to Dan, but all in this sort of scripting developer relations space. So I thought today I would just run briefly over something which I kind of hand-waved over last week, which was really this call timeout. So this is a new attribute setting in node-oracledb 3.0, which is coming out. So a lot of this code is already out there in the GitHub repo, in the node-oracledb Oracle subrepo. And we have a new attribute, which I'll get to in a minute. I think you can guess what it's called. It's called Call Timeout. But I just wanted to speak a little bit about how the round trips actually occur in the database. And this is a kind of hand-waving example. So forgive the lack of fine detail, because there's a lot of variability in what actually happens. But working from left to right in node-oracledb, you have a script, and we execute a query in this example. And that translates down into the Oracle Client Library a bunch of Oracle Call Interface methods, and this is not exclusive. And these do various things. This is Oracle standard sort of prepare, bind, execute, define, fetch process. So the prepare kind of does a parse, if you want to think about it. Bind, we know that binding variables is pretty important for performance and security. So this is the bind for that. Execute actually does something, so it'll actually go to the database and do something at that stage. After that, we might know what kinds of columns are being queried, so we kind of define, we allocate memory for getting return data, and then we start fetching data. And you may do one or more fetches, depending on how much data is needed. Now, fetching may or may not actually get data. Execute may not even go across to the database. You know, these things actually do need to interact somehow with the database at some level, but we do have caches like the statement cache, we have the client result cache, and we have things like prefetching. So there's a bunch of optimizations in there that Oracle does to try and avoid doing these calls across to the database network. But let's assume that somewhere in here, some of these things actually do some trips across to the database. Maybe you're fetching a lot of data, so you have to go and get batches of rows back. And these round trips are going to take various amounts of time. I'm just indicating that by the sort of length here. We don't know what's going on. That's effectively what a round trip is. It's a message across the database and back. And that's going to take some time through which the thread which is handling this execute is going to be waiting for some result to come back. So with the, whoops, back one, too many. We have this new call timeout attribute in milliseconds. This is available when you're using 18.3 Oracle Client Libraries. So it's a new Oracle database feature, which we've now implemented in node-oracledb. And let's just pretend that this is set to 15, which is the sort of length of this line. Therefore, these lines are, you know, whatever they are, you know, 6 and 8 or something like that, 6 and 10, something like that. Even though there are 2 round trips here, so this may be 6 plus 8, you know, maybe 14. Actually, let me rejig this to make it bigger. You know, let's say these are sort of you know, 10 and 14. This may be like 24. The whole cost of this may be taking 24 milliseconds to actually get some to complete back to the user to print data, and that's bigger than 15. There is no timeout triggered, and that's because the way that this call timeout actually works is it works on each of these times of the round trips, and that's for various internal technical limitation reasons. Performance, effectiveness, ability to actually bring you a feature without having to really break a lot of code and rewrite a lot of code. But that's just what it is. So if you have lots of small round trips happening, even though the whole sum of those may be longer than your call timeout, you're not going to get a timeout being triggered. But if you say set the call timeout to be 10, you know, somewhere less than this value, you will get a timeout. Now, maybe this first one's not going to timeout, so you're going to get some delay. This is going to take a certain amount of time to actually execute. And then some way into the second round trip, 10 milliseconds in, it's going to be interrupted. So what I'm kind of getting to here is that it's not going to be an immediate break after 10 milliseconds since you actually started the execute. It's going to be some unknown period after that, but at least you're going to get a break. What's going to happen is you're going to get one of two results, because after we do this interrupt, we actually have to clean up the connection, because that connection state may have memory allocated, all sorts of things going on there, messages being sent backwards and forwards. So that connection state needs to be cleaned up. And the connection cleanup is allowed to run for another amount of the period. In this case, it'll be 10 milliseconds. And if it's successful, you'll get a DPI 1067. And being successful means that that connection is still usable. You can go on and do other operations. But if the cleanup hasn't completed in that call timeout period, then you're going to get this error 3114 back, and experienced people know that that means connection is not usable anymore, and you have to release a connection and do another get session, get connection from the session pool. So that's the kind of summary. Basically, what I'm saying is that it's not as determinate as you might think from this period, but you will get a cleanup happening. You will get a timeout happening, and then you'll get either an error saying, hey, yes, the connection is still usable, or the connection is not usable afterwards. So that's a new feature going into 3.0. and is available now. If you want to compile the source code yourself, you can take the master branch from the GitHub repo and compile and play with that yourself, as long as you have the 18.3 client libraries. Link has the doc, which is not the production doc, but is the current 3.0 development doc. You can have a look at. What else did I want to mention? So while I was away on vacation recently, the Windows Instant Client was released to 18.3. So we've currently now got Windows, Linux, and the Solaris platforms Instant Client available. Don't have any ETAs on other platforms, so sorry, I can't pass on any gossip about that. I'm sitting here on a Mac, so I'm just as impatient as you about when the Mac's one is going to be released. But anyway, no news on that. The other little thing I wanted to mention was this soda access. So this is something which we are working on heavily. I mentioned it in the last month's talk. We are not ready to go out with it in 3.0 yet. It's coming, so it's just the hold up. When it's ready, then we'll push out 3.0. It's actually going to be a preview mode. Part of the investigation, every new user discovers a new class of bugs, they say, and we've discovered a memory leak here or there in the underlying Oracle libraries, and we think they're sort of significant enough that we're just going to call it a preview mode. If you really want to use Soda in a sort of production mode, we can give you the bug numbers, and you can get backports for those particular Oracle client library bugs. Those library bugs are fixed in a yet unreleased version of Oracle, so they'll be coming out at some stage. So let me just, I think I've got the tab open. If I can hide the flyover. Actually, I don't. Let me just go here. So this page is explaining what Soda is, simple Oracle document access. And it was available with Java and JDBC in the sort of 12.2 timeframe, and then it's now available in C and PL SQL. And since it's available in C and Node is written in C and other scripting languages are written in C, we're exposing Soda through the scripting languages as well. So this is a big new feature coming up momentarily. Let me just show you a quick example of what this may look like. This is a non-functional but proposed sample example. You're dealing with documents. So we're going to give you a whole bunch of new Soda kind of related classes. And what are we doing here? We've got a sort of top level call just to get a basic object which you can work with. Not much is happening here, but maybe in future something will happen. So we wanted to keep that. And you can just create collections. This kind of maps down to like a table. And in fact, it's all backed by tables underneath. So this actually will create a table called My Collection, which you'd never use as a table, or mostly never use as a table. I mean, it's there, obviously you can view it, and there's some high-end functionality you can run if you want to do analysis and what have you on that. It's indexes. Generally, it's dealing with JSON data types, but you can actually store any data types you like. So it's all set up by default just to work with JSON. So you can kind of see here, this is going to be an attribute of a sub-attribute of my JSON string. You kind of read ahead here. You can see the address, city. So this kind of maps to the index that we're going to create on this, just to speed up performance. Well, obviously, like any index, it's going to speed up query performance at the expense of maintaining the index when you do the inserts. But You already have that with SQL, but now you don't even need to do SQL. So basically, we're just going to do, take some kind of object you want to insert, JavaScript object, and you can just insert it. This one kind of does a get, so it actually gets back the same kind of object again, but it lets you then look at keys. So if in this case, by default, it's just auto-generating keys, so that's all set up for you. You can do a lot of customization if you go and look at the SOTA page that I showed before, the documentation there. There's an extensive amount of customization you can do, but you don't need to do that. And then it has a kind of query builder, operation builder, set of methods, finds, keys. If you look lower down, there's a, where do I have it? Filter. Yeah, sorry, the filter's down here. With a quite expressive language, likes and greater thans, and all sorts of things like order bys, things like that. So you can pass down, do quite a lot of operations on the documents itself. So effectively, you're doing, inserts. We can insert an object or insert and get there. You can get one, and we can look lower down. We're doing somewhere it was get documents, so you can get a whole bunch of documents back at a time. So it kind of looks simple. There's a lot of abstraction going on there, which is being handled by C layers and then by us in node-oracledb land. And this is something which is going to come soon. So it's not working yet in Node, but that was delayed by unrelated work that had to be done from the team. Where it is working, though, is in Python, because Anthony has been working hard. Anthony looks after this ODPI-C abstraction layer underneath, which is used by some of our database drivers. So he's got that implementation going for SOTA there. And then he's got the Python CX Oracle interface running. So I can show you the equivalent. This is a Python example. So it looks pretty similar. Basic example. I won't go into details, but you can see the same sort of structures we had before the index being created. Content is the same, insert and get. And so if I just run it in the top half of the screen, and my database is actually woken up in the morning, then you can see we're just getting the key back here. It's just a SHA is the key coming back. And then we can start printing out some of the documents. So obviously we're just getting back the same one that we pushed in. And we can start doing replace contents and dropping and counting and things like that. So that's a kind of quick example. So we're kind of close, but not as close as I'd like to be. We're pretty close with the Python. Should be pushing that out pretty soon. But node-oracledb, which is the focus obviously of this session, we're not quite there yet. What you can do right now is, this is on that PowerPoint slide, I go back to, you can use JSON already in the database pretty simply. So we have a JSON, I'm going to call it a data type. It's technically not a data type, but it's a bunch of JSON functionality in the database, which makes blobs and varchars and clobs actually look like it's a JSON data type. And by careful use of things like the stringify, you can basically take your object. This is the same object you saw in those other examples. You can stringify it, and you can just insert it straight into the table using a straight bind. So the trick here is that we in this simple example have just created a clob. So it's just treating it as a clob. So there's no special magic here, but that also means there's no special magic like that index you saw before. So if you start doing queries and you want to do lookups and things like that, you're going to have to do some really horrible kind of in-string kinds of slow performance to do an in-string, just to do like a string match on that whole lob when you're trying to retrieve something. In 12c in the database with the JSON type, when you're actually creating the column, I'll show it down here at the bottom, you can actually say, hey, just make sure this really is JSON, and therefore you're going to start getting a lot of the extra JSON functionality. And so insert is going to be pretty much the same. You still just do the stringify to take your JavaScript object and do the insert. And then what we get here is on the way out, obviously the opposite of stringify is the parse, so we can get it back as a JavaScript object. So it's parse, and the stringify and parse are just the key ingredients here. And then later on, you can start doing, I'm just looking for the example, because I've been on vacation, is you can start doing magic with all the JSON functionality underneath, because there's a lot of JSON, where is it? I've lost it. But there's oh yeah, things like this. So you can do things like the JSON exists. There's a whole bunch of JSON functionality I mentioned in the database. You can do where's on this. And oh, this is magic. It's so magic I didn't even see it. This is kind of, actually, where have I lost? I've got it.
Yeah, you've created a JSON object there, right? And you're comparing it to.
Yeah, I was just looking for the where clause. Oh, this is the one I'm looking for. This is the magic. That's where it's buried away. So this is drilling down into the JSON. Oops, sorry about that. Into the JSON string, and just saying, my column name and then the subfield. If I can get back, so name up here is the data attribute value. So you're just playing where's the attribute value of that JSON string is whatever my bind variable is. So in fact, it's so simple that it's kind of just easy to overlook. So this is available with 12.2. So if you can't wait for Soda, I would go ahead and start using this JSON functionality. The magic is really just the parse and the stringify. And somebody popped up a link. What was the chat link? Questions? Yes, I kind of skipped over that. So that was the end of my little introductory slideshow, just a couple of things which are happening. As Anthony put up on the group chat, there is a chat there, so you can type them if you see the flashing orange location, or you find that chat location, or you unmute yourself. You're welcome to ask questions at any stage. This is a kind of ask me anything, a little bit of an icebreaker at the start. But I thought if we don't get any questions, then Dan can just run ahead, and he was going to talk a little bit about his recent blog posts on REST and things like that.
Yeah, what about the pool drain? Did you want to talk about that too?
Yeah.
Other than pool drain, why did I not have that in my slides? Sorry, Danilo, I didn't have pool drain. Yeah, okay. I really am just back from vacation. So Danilo, who's on the call here, has just reading what he wrote on the chat there. No, I'm sure he didn't really cry, Danilo. So Danilo has been busy contributing, signed the Oracle contributor agreement, and has been busy answering some questions on the forum. Thanks very much for that on the issues list, and actually pushed in a patch, which I will show you the doc. I think is probably easier to look at. So again, this is going into the 3.0 branch, so it's all on the development version of the doc. And what it is basically a way to shut down a pool when you actually want it. Drain time. Okay, so it's actually an extra option to pool lock close. So previously currently in Node 2.x, node-oracledb 2.x, if you do a pool close and anybody's actually using a connection, this is just going to return an error immediately, and the pool is not going to be closed, and you're not going to be very happy. Danilo's put in this extra functionality, which we've did some work in the lower ODPI layers to support, that you can specify a forced close effectively. So you get a drain time now. So the behavior is if you don't have this optional parameter, then you're going to get that old behavior. As I said, close will only succeed if there are no connections being currently used, if the pool's quiet. But now if you actually specify a time, you can specify 0 or more. I kind of recommend using something slightly greater than 0. And I think you've kind of read ahead. If you specify 0 or more, then the pool will just be force closed at a certain time. There's a little bit of an optimization here. That is, if the pool really is quiet already, we're not going to wait that length of time. We're just going to close the pool. And then obviously the callback's going to occur. But if the pool is being used, people are still trying to do work, if executes are happening, then after this amount of time, then the pool is just going to be shut. And shutting the pool includes closing the connections to the database, which is the important thing. It's not so much closing the pool and shutting down your process in node-oracledb. You can kind of do that with any kind of kill command you like, but it's really being nice to the database and closing those sessions, releasing the memory on the database side, making your DBAs happy. So that's why this is going to be kind of useful, particularly in cases where you want to do an exit of a script. As I say, kind of recommend using a non-zero time just to give people a chance to execute, complete execute, commit and release the connections. if you call it with a non-zero, with a time, sorry, with any time, 0 or more, then nobody else from that time on is going to be able to do a new get connection. So we're going to block all new connections. We call it kind of pool draining. So it's basically trying to make everybody close their connections out of the pool. People who've already done a get connection and are using that connection will be able to use it for up to this amount of time. The one little trick I did want to mention just to finalize is this disable out-of-band breaks. And I did need this on Mac OS in some situations when talking to my database, which is running in a VM, also on Mac VS. So that, it's a networking related thing, which is really much lower than our expertise. And you may also see this, by the way, for using the break method in node-oracledb, that you may need to do this disable out-of-band breaks on in a SQLnet.rf file. So this is a client-side configuration file. It's basically exactly that line in a file called exactly this, and then you can put in a particular location, and then that will actually allow the breaks to be returned back from the database, and you won't see a hang. But you'll find that out pretty quickly. And I know the network team is doing some work in this area to try and automate some of this, but that's not there yet in the current versions. That's just a little trick. Just make sure you do your testing is really the bottom line. Danilo, thank you very much for that. We did do a little tweaking here and there. I know our tester moved a test or two into his sort of what he calls his private tests, things which are, may cause some problems in the general place when we want all the just general tests to just work for everybody out there. But I think actually having tests there was really a bonus for us. So we do love contributions like that. So thank you very much. And Anthony did a little bit of work there in the lower ODBI layers just to make sure that, that we try to minimize any issues with resources being used after the pool has been closed. So that'll all come out in the 3.0 when that comes out soon. And I'll let you yell out if you've got any questions at any stage. Otherwise, I'll just throw over to Dan.
So far, I don't have any questions. I'm just glad that this made to 3.0.
Yeah.
And I'm actually looking forward for some other things to implement. I wanted to do the array binding, but I know that's too much of a, how can I say this, a sort of a drama. So I'm not going to try that one.
Yeah, a lot of C++ there. I think I was speaking about examples at some stage? And Dan McGhan, I've got, maybe you can review that other example. I'm shaming you in public if you can look at that other example that I was created for the async await.
I just got back from vacation too,
I thought you were always on vacation. Now you've moved. So if you can have a look at that, then I can push that in. But Danilo, examples, even some comments about frameworks. Sorry, the name's just gone from me. I've been on vacation. What's the one that everybody tries to use?
GraphQL.
But yeah, not even GraphQL.
REST, right?
Angular.
Express.
Angular.
I think it's Angular.
Angular, yeah. Just some comments to tell people not to do it. I know you've got that captured in various issues, but maybe if you put it in a paragraph or two, we can actually just stick it in the doc and then just link people to it.
Sure. How we did that?
Just don't use it, or something like that. I mean, it's better that we have a black and white. It's like when you do projects, it's always good to have what you are doing and what you aren't doing, and what you can do and can't do, and no gray areas in between. So, so there's plenty of stuff there.
All right.
That would be great. And I have a long list of things we do want to do, but unfortunately, a lot of them are kind of C related. So that kind of gets painful. But you can, as you did with this, you pushed us to do the work in this area. You showed the interest, and we followed. You made Anthony, after he came back from his vacation, do some work there. So.
Sorry for that, by the way.
No problem at all. It was a good improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not that good with C++. At some point, I was actually complaining to them like, "Oh, this is too much. I can't handle it."
No, you'll be fine. You're fine.
All right.
You know where to find us. You also pushed Anthony to put in some session pool closing stuff into the Python driver as well. So we did double bonus effort there as well.
That's good.
Okay, Dan McGhan. Back to you.
If we want to keep this one short today, I think I'll let it go but if anyone does want me to talk about pagination, sorting, and filtering today, just let me know via chat. Otherwise, I just want to point out before we end the session today that I added to the chat a couple more links if you're interested in learning more about JSON and Oracle database and some of the capabilities now baked into 12.1, but really more 12.2 and beyond. So one in there is called Top 10 Tips for JSON Processing in the Database. And then the second one is actually a link to a series that one of the product managers on that team is putting together and extending out over time. So more and more features are being covered in that playlist. So definitely check that one out as well. Those are really good resources on that particular feature of the database or those features. So Danilo is asking if I've talked with Chris yet about the idea of a Slack channel for what we're doing here, and the answer is no. Did I mention I just got back from vacation? How long do I get to use that excuse? So you can go ahead and ask him yourself, sort of tell him what you were thinking, and
don't ask, just do it. Just create it.
All right. Some of the repositories that I've been, they use Slack as a method of sharing like knowledge between everybody without posting too much on the issues and leaving the issue section for things that are actually issues within the library. So I had this idea with them that we could use either Gitter or Slack to make some sort of a channel where people can exchange knowledge and sort of talk about the library without actually creating issues that are just questions. So that was my primary idea. And I think that would also be nice because people would go there and share their ideas so we can get a sense of what the community wants in terms of new features and what they have trouble without getting like 100 of questions in the issue sections that are not issues.
Yeah, that is a pain, and we often use it for announcements and things like that as well, although we probably still continue that just to get the biggest spread.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any particular issue. We are now using Slack internally in Oracle. I don't know whether that's a trade secret, probably not. And so that probably removes some issues we have in terms of just getting access to tooling, because we've already got the tools, the Slack GUI I'm using. So yeah, why don't you just go ahead and create it, and then we can join in. I don't, actually it was a long time back that I was using Slack with public channels. I have not checked whether we've still got access. Does anybody know our network blocks it or not? Anyway, we can just try. If it works, it works.
Shot, right?
Yeah. So Danilo, why don't, if you want to do stuff, why don't you go and create that channel, and you can be the channel master.
Okay, a public one?
Yeah.
All right, I will do then. I'll give you guys the link and we can start routing some of the discussions and question-based stuff to Slack.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Sure.
that would be useful.
Yeah, I may need to check on some things about what we're supposed to do and just avoid contamination and what have you, to make sure we don't accidentally post some future Oracle stuff there. But let's just try. Let's create it and go with it.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Also, I think I had one extra idea. I was going through the issues, and there are many things that are tagged as enhancements, but we don't really know if people want it or not. So I had this idea of doing sort of a poll, so everybody can vote what they want, and then I can see from there what issues or what enhancements are most wanted, and then work on them. I had this idea of coming up with a poll.
Yeah, that's a good idea, and I know my manager has asked me to do polls at various stages, not directly related to this, but more about usage. I think that's a great idea. I mean, I guess in my head I know what people do want most, or what I think people want most, but I could be wrong. So yeah, we should run with it. And by the way, what I think people want most is that object binding support.
Yeah, that's a big one.
You mean
yeah, I mean,
custom data type?
Yeah, the one
Exactly.
I think you were commenting recently on that, the binding of SQL and more.
Oh yeah, that one is a tough one.
Yeah, that's kind of tough because we may want to look at how we do binding. At the moment, we try and just automatically choose data types to be bound. You know, when we do the date binding, for example. I know in older versions of Oracle, and I haven't retested recently, that has some effects on the optimizer, slightly non-optimal. There was an issue about this some time back. So we may want to look at allowing people to specify that they're using a particular JSON data type with a particular Oracle database data type. At the moment, we're kind of hiding that to try and make it simple, but we may need to split that out. And then, aligned with that is this whole idea of the custom binding. So we may need to look at all the binding together. So it is actually a kind of big design task just to make sure it all plays nicely together.
Do we have any restrictions in terms of usage, like things like 7, Oracle 7 AI, or do we support everything?
The ODPI only works with Oracle 11.2 client libraries. And then there is a matrix. I mean, we kind of put the main bits of this into the install guide. There's a kind of matrix of support and what wasn't support and extended support for anybody who has access to the support.oracle.com website. There's a URL there. In fact, I think our doc has a link, or at least the document ID for that. But what it really boils down to is that the oldest database that you can connect to, so you need to be using 11.2 client libraries, and that will talk back to a 10.2 database. There's like was supported as in like, we will give you telephone support, and there was a technical, it would actually physically connect back to an older version, but we didn't test it kind of version. And I forget now what that older version was. It's in the CX Oracle doc for some reason.
Well, somebody has recently tested connecting to 9i database.
That's right, yeah.
And it worked.
The Go Oracle channel, yeah. So Go Oracle is the Go language. There's a third-party driver out there by one of our other community members. And yeah, so somebody had to test way back to about 9. So that's about the oldest that you can get to. I mean, theoretically, you could hack ODPI perhaps and strip out some functionality and what have you, make it work with older Oracle client libraries, and therefore even push the database version back further. But to be honest, we have more than enough work to do, so we're just not going to spend the time on that.
Cool.
And for people who don't know, the XE version 18.4 is when the next XE is out. That's all been publicly announced. So hopefully, since we've already got 18.3 out, so hopefully 18.4 is is sometime in the next decade. So hopefully it'll be soon. So there should be sort of less and less reason to go back a bit further. Danilo, did you have a particular database version you needed?
No, I'm working with 11 and 12, so I'm fine. I was just wondering what would be the actual amount of versions that we would have to consider in order to make sure that different sort of performance optimizers, they work for different versions. I know that from 11C to 12G, there are a lot of things that change with the optimizer, but I'm not as good with the older databases anymore.
Yeah, of course, here in our drive group, we tend to ignore those problems because that's database side problem. But I do understand that you as a developer do have to handle those things. We do have other colleagues who can help with those. Other people in Dan and Blaine's evangelist group are looking after things like that AskTOM website. And so we can get some help there if you need it.
All right. Any other questions? Cool. Well, then I guess we will meet in about 1 more month. Thanks for joining.
The pre-open world session.
Uh-oh. Somebody's got some work to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
See ya. Bye-bye.